My name is Sonali McDermid, and I'm an assistant professor of environmental studies at New York University. And I'm a climate modeler by training, and I look at the impact and evaluate the impact of climate change on agriculture, but also of agriculture and land use on our environmental systems. And so I've been at NYU for 1 year now and hope to continue. Globally, at this point, in terms of calories, we produce something, take your pick, anywhere between 2,700 and 2,900 calories per person per day. So we have enough food, particularly if we moved a little bit. I'm not saying don't eat meat. I'm saying even if we moved a little bit away from meat production, we have enough food globally to feed everybody comfortably. Now, to feed an additional 2 billion people, like 9-10 billion, right, by 2050, we're going to have to improve some things. Part of it is that we're going to have to reduce waste. That's going to be part of that as well, too, which is a big concern and a big issue. I think that, right now, India, China already produces enough food for everybody in the country if they want it, and even in India, it can be done, and it is really being done. The issues there lie not so much with the production, but it lies a little bit more with distribution and access to food, being able to afford it, being able to buy it, being able to use it before it rots, right? Being able to cook it, it's all of those other things. Food is not just about producing. Food is about all of the other parts of the supply chain, right up to the waste, right? And in that respect, we have big leaps to make, okay? We've done so much on the production side. In some ways, we're kind of good with production, right? Even though we need to be increasing it. There are all these other elements. And I think that when you see issues of starvation and hunger issues, particularly in the Indian context, some of that does stem from extreme events and weather events and crops being taken out and climate and things like that. But so much of it is also that inequality and the socioeconomic status and distribution and getting stuff on time, right? That becomes the problem. Nutritional issues as well, too. That becomes the problem. And so I think that if, India's taking steps, they've always had a public distribution system of food. They're increasing that public distribution system. So they're taking steps in the right direction. But even currently, we have enough food to feed everybody. And these same issues are recurring in sub-Saharan Africa as well, too. There have been documented cases of food aid coming into countries in sub-Saharan Africa and East Africa. Food aid coming in, let's say from the United States, when the local grain stores from local farmers are filled. But the trade works in such a way that it's cheaper to import food than it is to sell the food that's locally produced. And so all this food rots, but the food that's coming in isn't distributed well. So even though these countries have their own food stores produced by local farmers, they're getting food in from elsewhere, and then they can't distribute that food efficiently, right? So there have been reported stories of grain stores being filled in some of these countries and people starving, which is utterly unacceptable, right? And that's not an issue of production. It's an issue of all the other parts of the supply chain, including the way that governments, the efficiency and the effectiveness of governments. And so I think that there are all these things which, frankly, the production problem is perhaps the easiest one to solve. And I think that's why the production problem gets the most attention. It's much harder to get stakeholders and policymakers and politicians, some of whom are often corrupt in some of these places, to get to decide and agree and distribute things well. It's much harder to do that than it is to develop, at this point, a seed, and go through the production side. So these issues need to be solved. And these are not climate issues. These issues need to be solved in tandem with actually increasing production and on the production side of things. And instead, we're seeing something that's much more unequal in that lens. Particularly getting subsidies in order to boost irrigation infrastructure and some of the other inputs, right? Getting timely access to fertilizers and regular access. In some cases, if farmers don't have regular access to fertilizers, what winds up happening is that they kind of overuse the fertilizers that they have. Now, that's not good because the plant can only uptake a certain amount of fertilizer at a time, and whatever is not uptaken by the plant washes off, and that's what leads to some of these nitrogen pollution issues in rivers and streams and lakes, right? So being able to get farmers regular inputs such that they don't feel the need to overuse inputs, right? They can do it very selectively without reducing pollution. These are other issues. And I think it all stems, politics is, kind of separate from government in some senses, right? Like, I think it stems back to the capacity of the government to understand the importance of these issues and deal with them. And politics can get in the way, right, of that happening. And it's not just government, too. Sometimes the people who have the rights to these technologies, right, so even irrigation infrastructure, the tubing and piping that goes along with that, the pumps, the seed technologies, sometimes those are just very industry protected, right? And so the ability, how easily people can pay for that, right, as the price is dictated by these industries and private enterprises, sometimes that comes in the way too. So it's not just government. Sometimes it's also sort of the industry incentive to make things affordable, right? That gets in the way as well too. So there's multiple avenues at work here. But if sort of industry and government can come together, it could be a really powerful union to solve some of these problems.